recording. Hey guys, this is Doug. He's Aaron Cerrone, and you're listening to What's the Hazard? It is Friday, March 3rd, coming to you from lovely Omaha, Nebraska. It's going to be 50 degrees, man. No complaints from me for one day at least. Yeah, so Aaron and I used to kind of title our episodes leadership or safety leadership. And now what are we going to call it? Like, what the hell, or what's going on, or on the fly? I think we came up with
topics
on the fly because we tend to be a little bit spontaneous when we sit down and we always have some idea where we're going with this, but usually it takes its own path. And when we get there, we realize where we were going.
You know what's funny is I was, I go on another podcast once in a while with one of my very first martial arts instructors, and the other day we were on the phone, and we were he said, "Hey, what do you want to talk about?" As myself, him, and another person, a guy named Steve. And we're just chit-chatting, and like 5-6 minutes go by, and all of a sudden he blurts out, "Damn it, Steve, we should have been recording." Right?
Exactly.
It's just, it's really good conversation comes out organically. And I think that's funny because I was thinking about, I was like, I think Joe Rogan's got it figured out. Like, his podcast is too long. I can't sit there and listen to 3 hours. But I think the point is that he just starts having discussion and it comes out organically. When I think some podcasts, because they try to get it in a half hour, it gets really forced.
Yes.
And it's just not a natural conversation.
Yeah, you can feel the scriptedness of it. And it's
and
really,
it's
unnatural.
With him, over the course of 3 hours,
something good is going to
come out, right? And
I would agree.
And, I think to your point is, like, half the time, even when we're in a gym and we're BSing about something, I was like, man, we should have been recording.
Should have been recording that. Well, I think
that came out really
that's
good.
True too, because Cam will usually. We started coming in and we would just sit down and chat, and we'd have a great discussion, and then we would start recording, which is why we start recording, and then we're just capturing whatever the hell goes on. Hopefully it's nothing terribly offensive, but oftentimes the gems are in that pre-discussion before
we're not
we
on
even
network
start.
TV, so it doesn't matter. We can say whatever we want.
I don't think my mom's going to catch this one, so yeah, we can be as free to speak as we want to, but we do have some topics, and there's been a lot going on, man. My life has been incredibly hectic the last few weeks, and which is interesting. And, I'm not here to air any personal issues or dirty laundry or anything, but really crazy few weeks. And I know you've had a lot going on in your life the last few weeks. And you look, I don't watch news. I can't watch the news, but I know there are things going on in the world.
Sure.
At least I assume there are.
Right.
But things like East Palestine, that tragedy.
Sure.
And one thing, I'm always offended when they assemble all the politicians. You saw this picture probably where they got the governor and they got the EPA director, and they're all in some poor bastard's house drinking tap water just to show that it's safe.
Right.
Did you see that?
Right. It's always out there.
Oh my God. I was just disgusted.
And you wonder if it's behind the scenes, they put the bottle.
Oh yeah, man. Right? Or they took some antidote beforehand or whatever. They
put the iodine tablets in, like we used to have to.
Exactly.
The iodine tablets.
I'm just, it's one thing to come out and say, watch these huge clouds of vinyl chloride decomposition products wafting through town and say it's safe to go back to your home. But it's another thing to put on that bullshit photo op stuff that just drives me crazy.
You know what's crazy? I just, I was doing some of my own homework the other night, and I had Netflix on in the back, and there's this mushroom documentary. This guy named Paul Stamets.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, so he's the mushroom guy. But they've actually started using fungi and mushrooms to clean up waste spills because fungus is a natural decomposer, and it'll decompose anything. And they did some experiments where they took piles of petroleum or oil spills, and then they put 3 different things on it, and then his team went in and put some mushroom or some fungus, mycelium or something, and they came back X number of days later and lifted the tarps, and the thing was covered and flourishing in mushrooms, and it was decomposing everything.
Interesting.
And so when I hear spills like that, I'm like, throw mushrooms all over it.
Right.
Fix it.
But it's interesting because you and I mean, both of us having your professionally and my, just personal interest in fitness and those things and nutrition, and you are delving into the nutrition world more deeply through, education and stuff. But mushrooms always come up, man. I mean, all those different types of mushrooms, fungus in general.
Fungus, right? Mushroom is just,
they come up.
It's just the cap, right? The real fungus is in the ground. The mycelium, the network that's in the ground. The mushroom is just like the fruit, for lack of a better term, the cap that you see, which is the edible piece. But the real magic is in the actual,
and what's going on below the
underneath
surface.
it, right? The mycelium net, the mycelium fields. It's the largest organism in the world. The mycelium mat up in the Northwest. It's the largest living organism in the world.
All interconnected, one huge living
literally
organism.
A network. It's crazy.
It is cool.
But what it can do is amazing. Like we have chickens and bees behind the gym, and my front desk person Ashley, she swears by it. She'll get mycelium, and whatever she puts it on, the shit grows like crazy. And she'll put it around the bees, and it helps bees develop immune system. The chickens flourish. It's just amazing.
It is interesting. It doesn't seem like that should be a big mystery. I mean, that these natural remedies and things are so powerful, but we tend to ignore them for the AMA or the pharmaceutical industries. Constant, bombardment with their promotions.
Right, because it's there's no long-term studies on it, because you really can't ethically do long-term studies on humans and this stuff. But the whole stigma of magic mushrooms, the government got looped out under the war on drugs. So a lot of the experiments, there was a lot of research being done on, especially the chemical effects on the brain and the psychology of it, and how it can help people with serious psychological issues. There was a lot of research being done, and then when the war on drugs kicked in, it just cut it all off. Because it got lumped in with especially psilocybin, which is what makes you trip, quote unquote trip. But there's also tons and tons of research on microdosing with it and the effects it has on the brain, and how it can help people stop stuttering and come over emotional issues, and
even enhanced brain capacity.
Well, a lot of activity. Silicon Valley is shifting from Adderall to microdosing with mushrooms, because mushrooms are natural and has a natural effect, and it's not man-made synthetic drug. So, but the research is now starting to kick back up now that a lot of states have decriminalized a lot of things. Now the research is kicking back up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can neither confirm nor deny any experimentation with those substances you've just mentioned back in the 70s and 80s, but perhaps, but hypothetically, I thought it was great. So, now I've never laughed so hard in my life. You can watch even like crappy movies like, some like, I like Adam Sandler, but some of those old shitty movies that are even funny on, the right substance. But anyway, man, let's get to the point for today. We actually have a couple of things that we mentioned that might be worth talking. You just posted something on LinkedIn that I thought was really interesting. You made a reference to the rule of thirds.
Right.
And I think it was attached to an Olympian, an athlete who was making the comment.
It was talk a little bit about a gymnast and just had a bad day.
Yeah, talk about the rule of thirds and what that is.
Practice, and her coach was explaining the rule of thirds. She goes, "Oh, it's the rule of thirds," and really what it comes down to is, look, a third of the time it should be easy, a third of the time it should be really, really hard. Okay, meaning like if every day is successful and every day it's easy, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. If every day it's incredibly hard, where it becomes depressing and almost
you're failing every day.
You just don't want to do it, then it's too hard, right? And the third of the time it should be somewhere in the middle, where you have a halfway decent day, and that. So if you apply the rule of thirds, that's how you should feel. A third of the time it should be like, man, I'm just not getting it. A third of the time you're just nailing it, and a third of the time you're having an all right day where you're getting it some of the time, and now you're in the right zone for it all.
It's interesting.
It should never be easy all the time.
You're not trying hard enough.
It should be hard all the time.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want to be failing continuously. Maybe you're overdoing. You don't want to be succeeding all of the time. And I think there is definitely application of that to the workplace. I mean,
100%. If it's always going well and always batting 1,000 and never having any problems, I would really get worried and really question, like, there's nothing wrong here. Like, there's nobody's messing anything up, or are we just not looking anymore? Or have we stopped seeing it? Right. So I think the rule of thirds really applies to the safety world as well. It's like, are we walking around going, man, this is great. We haven't had a single issue in 3 years.
No doubt.
Really? Like,
Right.
really? Are we just not pushing hard anymore? Are we
Mm-hmm.
not looking anymore? Are we not holding ourselves to the level of the law anymore? Are we not holding our feet to fire? Or are we gotten complacent?
Yeah, nobody's reporting things anymore, or whatever the case
and
might
vice
be.
the opposite. Is it a shit show all the time? Like you like you don't, I mean, there's times where it maybe should be to some degree, and then you try to live in that middle third most of the time. But
that is a really interesting gauge. You know, it is useful. And I can remember the frustrations of failure in training or in whatever activity you're doing. And I can remember when things are going well, and, you know, then it would fluctuate back and forth and you'd get really frustrated because I don't know if you're expecting it to be good all the time. And that's either unsustainable or you've kind of set your training parameters wrong or whatever that happens to be.
It's like in practice, I tell guys, I see guys get frustrated and I'm like, what are you pissed off about? Oh, so-and-so beat me. I'm like, nobody wins practice, dude. You're looking at it all wrong.
Yeah.
Like, what did you get better? Were you working on anything? Because if you take this mentality of I lost at practice, I got to try harder, or it's like, okay, then you're never going to feel successful, right? And you're looking at practice the wrong way. Practice is a way to get better. It's meant to train. It's meant to work on something, whether it's controlled repetitions or live reps or like IA scrimmages type thing. But it's like you walk away thinking you lost practice, or worse yet, maybe you walk away thinking you won practice. Like,
even worse.
Well, who did you beat?
Right.
And maybe did they even care you beat them?
Yeah, someone who's trying
How
to get
hard
better.
Were they trying, right?
Someone who's got a handle.
So I think the rule of thirds applies there because it's like, well, you have to temper compared to what? Like, what are you gauging this against? Like, hey, we did really well. Well, compared to what? Compared to how we did last month? Okay, that makes sense to me. Compared to the industry standard, compared to some bullshit matrix we made up, metrics, you know. So I would look at, if I'm running a safety program, I would sit back and go, okay, I feel like we've been doing really well. For how long? Oh, a year. Okay, well, that's probably too long. Like, I haven't found anything wrong for a year.
We are really
Right?
impressive.
We've just been patting ourselves on the back for a year. Oh, the big board number has been 0 for a year. Well, okay, that doesn't mean everything is perfect.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So I think if you find yourselves, if you've been in this one of the third where everything's going great for too long, and you realize oh man, we're never in that other third. Well, that's probably wrong.
That's a great
and not wrong is probably naive. Naive is probably a better word.
Yeah, I would
It's
agree.
naive to think there's nothing behind the scenes that couldn't be looked at or couldn't be improved or doesn't need a keen eye on it.
And these are those companies, I don't mean to interrupt you, but those companies that don't have injuries, they have that board that, 3,247 days without a lost time incident or whatever. We could talk about complacency all you want, but I think another thing that you lose is leverage with the executives. The executives think, man, we got this under control. And now you go to the executives with, oh, I need some money for this. And well, do you really? Because man, we haven't had a lost time injury in 3,000 days or whatever. I think they kind of lose focus.
Or their heads explode when something does happen. How did this happen?
Or that too. Yeah. We said we had everything in order.
Right. And it's just one of those things where if you think about, man, I'm not saying you want to live in either one of these, but you have to appreciate the benefit of all three thirds.
And that you will pass through all of them at some point.
And you should.
Right.
And you should, to the point where if you're in this upper third where everything's going great, okay, we probably need to start pushing a little harder. We probably need to dial in a few things. Every process, you can get to a point where it's running very good, very efficiently, very effective, very consistent, very accurate, very precise. But then if you let it alone, what naturally tends to happen, right? It naturally starts to move towards chaos. We've all done it. You've cleaned your house top to bottom. What eventually happens? You could clean a house top to bottom, leave it for a month and come back, and somehow it's dirty. It's dusty.
Yep.
It's a musty smell, whatever it is. Like, well, how'd that happen? Nobody hasn't been in here. It's been sealed up, but it still just gravitates towards getting dirty.
Yeah.
And processes are the same. They will gravitate towards inefficiency. people.
It's kind of like entropy almost, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you got to put energy into a system.
And call it what you want, entropy, complacency, whatever it is, we will eventually start to move away from perfection unless we stay on top of it and force ourselves to continuously improve. That's the whole point of continuous improvement and Kaizen and all that stuff. So it's understanding, hey, I feel like I'm here. I know I'm probably dipping in here. I need to consider this. And if I'm not dipping in here, I need to push myself to be in this area of, okay, we've got this knocked out. Let's go on to something else and challenge ourselves again. Right. Let's move the program forward. Let's take it a step further. Let's take it a step further. We got to get out of our comfort zone. Sometimes you hear it referred to as that. When we say we got to get out of our comfort zone, it's understanding I've been living in this third of perfection. I need to dip into this third of chaos and pain to force myself to improve.
Right. I would agree. And usually that's what it takes for me personally. I need a little bit of pain or discomfort in order to motivate me to put energy back into the system to improve. So if everything is going too smoothly, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade necessarily, but I think it's time to be cautious or at least considerate about drifting into that discomfort a little bit.
Right. And I get it as safety professionals, like if things are going well and the jobs are getting done and margins are good and the company's making money, you don't want to rock the boat. Like the CEO, the CFO, and the COO don't want you going there screwing with stuff. Let it alone. It's working well. We're making money. Don't mess with it. I get that. I get it. Because the last thing you want to do is hinder production or slow productivity in any way with some cockamamie safety thing you want to try to do.
Right.
Nobody's getting hurt. We're making money. Let it alone.
Yeah.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I understand that. But that's not the right answer.
Yeah.
The right answer is you do need to push against it. You do need to challenge it. You do need to throw in wrinkles. It's the same thing. Retail places, especially grocery stores, will do this, right? There's this concept called 5S in lean, right? Sort, straighten, shine, standardize, sustain, right? It's basically housekeeping. Organize everything. Everything has its place. It's easier to restock. It's easier to find. If something's out of place, it's noticeable. But what do grocery stores always do? So we have a routine, right? People are creatures of habit. And even in a grocery store, we'll have a same path we take all the time because there's certain things we eat, there's certain things we stay away from, and we develop a path that we, and then you go to look for something, and then one day you can't find it because they moved it. You're like, what the hell? It's always been here, and they moved it. So you gotta ask yourself, why would they move it?
They're fucking with me, man. They do it to me all the time. It drives me crazy.
So no, they move it because it forces you to relearn the store.
Yeah.
It forces you to see things you stop seeing after a while. Because we get blinders on, we get our things, we get out, right? So we will naturally get as efficient as we can, right? Because time is money, time is precious. I want to get in, get out. I get my routine. And then when they mess with it, now I got to look head up going, where is everything? And now I start seeing stuff and maybe impulse buy. Okay. So they force you to break your routine. They force you to relearn everything. And that's very valuable in the safety world, I think, because it forces us to reset and relearn stuff, touch things we haven't seen before. We get in too much of a mode, a complacent mode, a mode of, hey, we're firing all cylinders. We're just humming along. Things are going great. We're up in this third. And we're living in this third. And it's like, nah, man, we got to get down here. We got to throw ourselves in this once in a while. If nothing else, to learn new things or to relearn or re-see things we stopped seeing after a while. Right. So really it's like a gymnast, that example that you saw was a gymnast, and she said she wasn't hitting her splits. Well, if you're always hitting them, okay, it's time to change it up. It's time to weightlifting, right? Progressive adaptation. Right? You have to change it up because the body adapts and you stop growing. Same thing in your safety program. You have to change it up or it stops growing. You have to maybe present information a different way or bring on something new, or you have to, it sounds bad, but you have to induce some pain somehow to make for the program to continue to grow and for people to continue to learn and people to stay cognizant and aware of what's happening around them.
That's a really interesting concept. And the analogy that you have given is one that I'm familiar with because I do the grocery shopping in my family. And when they change the store, it drives me crazy. I mean, because I have developed that pattern habitual pattern that I go exactly to where I want.
And you're in a hurry.
I see people looking around the store and I'm like, can I help you find something? Because I know where shit is because the way I've been,
right.
And then they move it and it really causes me distress. And I have to start, as you said, going up and down the aisles and looking now because I can't find my shit. And the idea that that's obviously intentional and how we can apply that in our workplaces.
Right. It's not really big things, right? It's not, they're never going to move the meat counter. They're never going to move dairy. They're never going to move the fresh produce. They won't move the bigger. They'll keep the big things where they are. It's the little things around it they'll screw with, right? Because that's just enough, right? It's just enough to make you pick your head up and be aware and relearn.
That's great.
Right. So I'm not saying overhaul your safety program.
Yeah.
I'm saying change little things. And you keep changing little things periodically to force people to stay aware and stay in the game.
I'm trying to envision what that would be that would have the effect you are describing without jeopardizing something. And so I'm thinking like maybe you could change the signage, We've got certain signage that we walk past every day.
Change the colors. Change the location.
Maybe move the location slightly. Maybe, just change the verbiage on
change
a
when
little
you
bit.
Do your meetings. Change how you do your meetings. Put different people in charge of the meetings. We talked about this before. Rotate who does the topic of the day.
Right.
Because now that's sharing the pain. Right. No one likes to talk. Right. So you just share the pain. Make it be painful for somebody and rotate around. So now they're forced to learn. They're forced to get up and talk. They're forced to be a part of it. Everybody shares in it. And I'd say do something like move the fire extinguishers. But you got to be careful about that because you want people to know exactly where that is.
Right.
But even then, people forget where it's at.
Sure.
And moving it goes, oh, man, I forgot it was over there. Okay.
Right.
I just relearned where it's at. Now it's fresh on my mind. It's right there. Okay. We've all been there. Where's that damn thing again? Because we forgot where it was.
Yeah.
So even there's even value in moving that, and then but making it known, making it a production, and so I doing spot checks, periodically doing spot checks on people is a way to induce some pain and get into that, because now they know at any point they're liable to be spot checked, and if there's some consequences, which in sports the consequence is losing or having a bad practice or pain on your body. Well, there should be some consequence of failing a spot check, because it's like, and you got to be careful. Like you don't want to, if you make them too harsh and people want to leave, but it's like, there has to be something like, hey, next time, it's got to be a little more than that, right? To make them want to and be motivated. It's part of the motivation theory. You got to make them want to do it, but also reward people too. If I spot check you and you knock it out of the park, gift card or something, something.
Yeah.
So there's got to be both ends of it.
Yeah.
And I just, thirds is a neat way to put it. It's probably not cleanly like thirds, but the point was, it's like not every day should be a great day.
Yeah, but if it's always great or always shitty,
you should question.
You need some adjustment.
100%.
Yeah.
You never want to live in either one of them.
Right. That's a really interesting concept. And I saw that you had posted that recently, and I watched that video, and I thought that'd be interesting to talk about. I've got a question for you. So, and we have not pre-discussed this, so I don't mean to take you off guard, but
no, you do. You do. 100%.
But to some degree, I want to put you in your discomfort zone, So OSHA believes that penalties motivate or the threat of penalty, I should say, motivates people to comply.
It can. Maybe.
I'm interested in this concept. So I'm thinking about it in these terms. OSHA raises their penalty amount. They're serious, the serious violation, maximum statutory penalty. When I was in the game, which has been 9 years ago, the maximum was $7,000 for a serious violation without any penalty reduction stuff. And now it's $15,400 or something for a serious violation.
So you got to be careful. You're talking to somebody who doesn't think our legal system has stiff enough penalties.
Okay, and that's an interesting question. But we're talking
for certain crimes.
We're talking about motivation now, right?
No, but that's a motivation. It's a motivating factor.
Say you get a speeding ticket, costs you $150 or something. Why not make a speeding ticket $15,000? I mean,
so there's two factors there, right?
Change motivation.
So you have what's called positive and negative reinforcement, right? And people confuse this and misunderstand this. So negative consequences is actually positive reinforcement. And here's what you have to understand with positive reinforcement. If you do something, something will happen, right? I will do something to you, positive or negative, right? So positive reinforcement is, okay, if you speed, I'll give you a ticket. That's positive reinforcement. I'm doing something to you. Negative reinforcement was if I took something away from you.
Right. Okay.
Right. So a speeding ticket is positive reinforcement. Taking your license would be negative reinforcement. You get a negative consequence, right? They're both applicable, right? They're both motivators,
and both consequences
in different ways, right? And they are valuable. And truth be told, we put speeding signs up. We do give traffic tickets, but they're not high enough to really stop people. It's more of a revenue generating scheme than anything.
Okay.
To your point, I don't think raising the fine would stop people from speeding. I think the threat of losing your license would have be a greater motivator.
I see. Okay. Interesting.
Because you take away their mode of transportation. Now the negative consequence might be people just drive without licenses, which is very possible. But the point is nobody's really afraid of the fine.
I don't think that's what
it's not enough. It's not enough of a motivator to not speed. And that's clear, right? There's no arguing that. If you raise the fine and raise the consequences, would it stop people from speeding? It'll probably have a better chance, to be quite honest. There are countries where if you steal, you're losing a finger. If you rape, you're losing your junk, right? If you murder, it's death penalty.
Right.
That's a big motivator. Our country is you're innocent till proven guilty, unless it's a court of public opinion, which is just the opposite. Because the idea is we would rather set a guilty person free than run the risk of imprisoning an innocent person.
I agree with that.
Now, there are other countries that are just the opposite. Their philosophy is better to imprison a single innocent person and send the message to everybody, don't do this.
Interesting. Yeah. Right. Right.
And bring down the level of incidence altogether. I see both sides. But in terms of safety, it's both sides, right? You have to, it can't be always a slap on the hand, because it's like, well, I'm not going to lose my job. So what's the big deal?
And I can handle a $100 fine.
They're not going to do anything. Just don't worry about it. They're not going to do anything. So over the years, OSHA, I'm sure, realized these big companies don't give a shit about $7,000. They've already written it into the budget. Right. They've already charged it off they worked it into their charge to the client, because they know we're probably going to whack them 3 times. So they already worked in $30,000. They figured that out. So that's why the fines keep getting higher and higher, because you have to have some pain threshold that'll get people to stop it. Now, OSHA's tactic might be better if, instead of fining people, which is a positive reinforcement, figure out how to take something away. You're shut down for 60 days.
Ooh, that's an interesting thought.
Because now they can't revenue. Right? They've already factored in the fine in their revenue approach, right?
Yeah.
But if you say no fine, you're shut down for 60 days. I bet you that would change the tune a little bit.
It certainly might.
Because
I think they would be fearful of the impact that would have on the employees, certainly, by shutting down, or maybe the company had to continue to pay them during that shutdown period or something. I don't know.
Well, and that could be part of the penalty. Not only you shut down, you have to continue to pay your employees.
Then the employees would be creating violations like crazy to get some time off. But it is an interesting concept to me. It's an interesting concept. And you said something in there that I thought was really interesting. When I was with OSHA many years ago, one of our younger compliance officers made an inspection of a dairy that I won't mention the name, but
we've all eaten their ice cream.
Yes, that's the one. And so the citation package is what we were referred to then as a significant case. It was over $100,000 in penalties. And it originated after the initial inspection at around 70, 80,000. But, once you get close to sniffing that SIG case level, then the managers really push to get over it, because if you get a significant case as an office, there's some accolades and recognition that come with that. So we were expected to get a certain number of SIG cases each year. And so once we were in that range, then what about this and maybe that? And all of a sudden now it's $120,000.
Sure.
And the package goes out, and I ran to the store and bought milk. because that company is not going to lose $120,000.
Well, they're going to raise the price.
They're going to even if they raise the price of milk a penny,
right.
They make it up that day, literally in sales. And so as everybody's patting themselves on the back and what a great thing we've done, knowing that it may not have been the most, perfect citation package. I'm not casting aspersions, but sometimes things that maybe would have gone otherwise uncited get mentioned just to get to that number.
But in
I just knew you guys are crazy because this company's not affected by this. They're not affected by this.
In OSHA's defense there, it's like, well, don't give me a reason to look.
Mm-hmm.
And if I am looking, now I'm going to look at everything.
Absolutely.
It's like when you do renovation of your house. Once you tear that wall out, now you're uncovering everything. You're
Absolutely.
like, oh crap! There's the black mold. There's the water damage. There's all.
Believe me when I say I'm not blaming OSHA.
Right.
The system is the system.
Right. Just don't give me.
I'm just curious as to how much of a motivator it truly is.
For the larger companies, not. The smaller companies, clearly the money is a bigger.
I think the smaller companies really run scared. Because they know, if they're even aware, they know $15,000.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge for them. I had a friend of mine. I told you this. One of the guys in my gym started a small framing company on the side, and they're humming along doing it, and they got whacked one day. And it was funny. Even the OSHA inspector said, "Hey, we weren't coming to look at you. We just happened to be coming through the neighborhood and saw your guys, so they stopped and nailed them.
Sure,
and they got fined. And it was a young company." Not even a year in business, and it wasn't a big number, but it was very impactful for that small company, right? So the smaller the companies, they don't have the cash reserve, they don't have the resources to absorb it. It's very impactful. For the big dogs, they got money set aside ready for that. Like they know, and let's be honest, the laws of probability say you're going to have violations. Like you kick enough field goals, you're going to miss one eventually. So they on these big job sites, and after you have enough job sites running, you're gonna have violations. Like it's just shit happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they have money set aside, waiting for it. And they know OSHA is gonna pinch them at some point because if nothing by happenstance, they're driving through the neighborhood and see when you're. Right. So they got money set aside, and of course, the larger the company it is, the more they can absorb. So it's just okay, pay it and keep going.
Yeah.
Now they'll tell people to fix their stuff because they don't want to keep paying things like that.
Right.
But it is not as much of a motivator at all. So that's one of those things where either the fine has to be just ridiculously high, which now you got to question the fairness of it.
Yeah.
And why'd we get the $10 million fine? They got 10 grand. Like, okay, I get that as well. So that's why I think shutting them down, if everybody gets shut down 60 days, 60 days is 60 days for everybody. I'm just making that number up. I have no idea what it would be. But the difference in the consequences, pay this or I take something from you. I put something on you or I take something from you. Okay, 60 days is 60 days. That's impactful for anybody.
Right.
So now it's relative.
Right.
To what's going on.
But now that being said, this is really interesting. And just the whole psychology of motivation is interesting. It's interesting to me. I've always wondered, how do you motivate employees? Sure. How do you motivate companies? All that stuff is kind of interesting. And does money motivate them? OSHA has kind of dusted off this old instance by instance citation policy recently, where in really egregious cases back in my day, rather than just give them one citation for not wearing PPE, we would go through and each employee that was caught not wearing PPE would be an instance that could be cited that amount of money. So your $15,000 penalty for 10 people just went to $150,000 or something.
Right.
They've kind of rolled that back out and trumpeted that a little bit. Again, I think with the intention of motivating the bigger companies who aren't really affected by the existing penalties,
it's like kids
to take notice at least.
Sure, it's like kids. Think about your kids, right? Certain kids respond to a spanking. Others respond to getting their toys taken away. Right? Positive, negative reinforcement there. You got to figure out, every company's going to respond differently. So, if you go in there and whack them with a fine, they don't even bat an eye. Okay, that didn't work. Next time we'll shut them down. Next time we'll try this till we get our point across. It's just like kids. Companies are just like kids. They're all going to react differently to different consequences.
Right.
And you got to figure out which ones the most motivating and make it work. And the same thing with employees, right? Certain employees are worried about losing their jobs. Certain employees aren't. Certain employees really, a gift card really resonates with them. Others would rather have a day off. Certain consequences are impactful to certain employees, and then others don't even bat an eye at it. You just got to figure that out, right? That's part of motivation theory. It's not cleanly cut across the board to everybody or every organization. You have to tweak it and find out what's going to motivate and resonate with that person or that organization. Right. I think that's one of the things OSHA struggles with, because it's government agency. So they want a consistent standard way of doing things. Certainly. But clearly it doesn't have the same impact on everybody, or it's not the same motivating effect it has on every organization. Right. So it really works in one case and falls incredibly short in another instance. That's really an astute observation. You're trying to cookie cutter. You're trying to cookie cutter it, and it's just not that easy. And that brings me to, that's a great comment, because that segues well into this question of compliance. I was at a facility yesterday, and we were talking about some leadership stuff and some safety stuff. And the company representative had mentioned to me, they had really focused heavily for years on being in compliance, following the OSHA regulations. And that was their safety effort. And yet their injury rates continued to go up, and their EMR continued to rise. You know, their lost runs were increasing. And he said, we finally got away from that. We realized that wasn't working for us, focusing so heavily on compliance. And they started working on just more operational excellence, leadership management stuff. Working safely. Exactly. Identifying real hazards rather than just focusing. Now, you can't abandon compliance, but the focus changed. And now their EMR has come down. Their injury rates have come down. So really what they did was they shifted, like we've been talking about for a couple of years now. They shifted from a safety program mindset to a culture of working safely mindset. Exactly. When you focus on compliance, you focus on the minimums, and then you live at the minimums. And it's very hard to get above that, because you're just focused on the minimums. Right. Let's just get this. Let's get this. But then you stay there. There's a tendency to stay there. It's like the military and your PT standards, right? There's standards you have to meet. Well, everybody just wants to meet the standard. There's no reward for going above it. So now you meet the standard, and half the force walks around out of shape. Because you're just focused on the minimums. You're focused on compliance. When you get and I'll just keep fitness as an example, instead of focusing on the compliance and hitting the minimums, if you had a culture of being incredibly healthy and super fit, you're going to blow by those. It's because now you're focusing up here. Now you're creating a culture and a lifestyle of it. So when they got away from compliance and just started focusing on a culture of working safely, and doing things the right way, and just making it a way of life and a lifestyle. This is just how we do business. They probably blew by those standards. Blew right past because they're so far ahead of it now. It's like we don't even worry about the minimums because we're so far ahead of it. It's ridiculous. And it's a kind of forest for the trees. It's a mindset, right? It's a mindset approach. So anytime you just focus on compliance, you automatically begin to relegate yourself to the minimums. And it just fosters mediocrity. Interesting. Yeah. It just naturally fosters mediocrity. This is why, like, not to get political, but anytime you have any kind of socialized system, it breeds mediocrity. Why? Because you immediately are focusing on the minimums. Right. There's nothing motivating you to go above and beyond. Exactly. Right? It just isn't. That's the difference between like public school and private school. What's now some of the public schools are very good. I'm not poo-pooing public schools, but private or socialized or government-run enterprise, the private enterprise is always better. That's why it costs more in a lot of cases, right? Because they're focusing on above and beyond, whereas generally the government-run or socialized type of programs just are worried about compliance and focused on the minimums. You regress to the mean. Why would you go above and beyond? It just breeds mediocrity. Like everybody knows it. Like, you hear about socialized medicine around the world. It's great. It's great. It's great. But we all know, even in Canada, as soon as doctors hit their quotas, they're done. They shut down. Right. Because what's the motivating factor to do more, to get better? I hit the quota. That's all I'm supposed to do. It's all I'm mandated to do. Why should I do more? Like, I know people say, well, the goodness of their heart, but okay, well, if I can work 8 hours a day and quit. Why would I work 16?
Right.
But that's because the focus is on the compliance. It's on it's on the minimums. And I think it's just natural to get away. That's why we've been saying, get away from the big board, get away from the number on the big board, because that just breeds mediocrity. It just breeds, oh, the number's 0, so everything's good. We can stop.
Right. That's a great,
we can
really
stop.
Interesting.
Right. Why do more? The number's 0. There's no need to do more.
There's really no discretionary energy, that whole thing that Paul O'Neill talked about. You get discretionary energy when employees feel valued, they feel part of a team, all of those kind of things. If we're just shooting for the bare minimum, if the bare minimum, if compliance is the pinnacle, then why are we going to go beyond that?
Sure. That's why a lot of times, like every time UNO will bring Warren Buffett, I call him Uncle Warren, right? Because his face is everywhere at the College of Business. And then,
I'm sure.
And then Bill Gates will come in once in a while and they'll have a talk. And there's always one student that says, "What's your advice for a new graduate?" And they, without a hiccup, they'll say, "Find something you're passionate about." Now, why would two of the richest guys in the world say that? Because they know if they hire somebody who's passionate about their work, you'll put in 60 hours and I'll pay you for 40, because you don't care. You love doing it. You'll work for free. And you end up doing work for damn near free.
For free.
I'm paying you 40. You'll put 60, 80 in because you love doing it. And then, so that's the thing. Like when you do something you're passionate about, you'll give that extra energy without even thinking twice. You don't even care if you're getting paid for it, because now you want to do it. It's part of your DNA. You're on board. You're on the bus. You're all in. What do I need to do? I'll put in the extra time without even thinking twice about it. And that's what blows a company past the minimums and past mediocrity, right? Because they get the buy-in from everybody. If you're just focused on compliance, everybody just stays in this minimum effort kind of mode. So, you got to tap into that passion and get people passionate about your program, or at least on board of the program, where they see this intrinsic value, this altruistic benefit to them beyond the paycheck, beyond the money, beyond the program itself. It's doing all these other things for me. And then you get that extra energy, and then the company just blows through those. It's that cultural approach.
Yeah. It's interesting.
And it's, that's why I hate, I get it. Like, track the numbers, but track it quietly. Like, there's a time and a place, but it can't be the sole focus. Right.
First thing you see when you come in the morning.
Goal. Like, that's not the goal.
Right.
That's a means to an end.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And it's pointing to whatever's up on the screen, right?
Yeah. It's important to know those things. It's important to track those things. But I mean, when it's the first thing you see every day, the last thing you see when you're leaving, and it is the obsession.
Sure.
It tends to cloud the real.
It's like my clients, and not to be sexist, women especially, but guys are guilty as well. Like, they come in and say, "Hey, I want to lose weight. I'm diabetic, or I'm borderline diabetic, and this, that, and the other thing," and they want to focus on that number on the scale, and they can't get past it. And I had a client one time. She's like, "Aaron, I'm really frustrated." I'm like, "Well, why?" She's, "I'm not losing any weight." I go, "So?" "But I was here to lose weight," and I was like, Susie, we'll just call her Susie. I go, "Susie, how many dress sizes are you down?" "I'm down 2 dress sizes." "Do you feel good?" "Yeah." "Are you sleeping better?" "Yeah." "Do you have more energy?" "Yeah."
Stronger?
Who gives a shit what's on the scale?
Right. Some other chick somewhere.
Right. So, but the point was, she got so focused on that number, because that was the bar, that was the compliance number, and then you failed to see all the other wins that were happening around it. Yeah. It's like, do you not see what's happening?
Right.
So you get past the number. It's like,
it's easy to get caught up in that, but it is not the end.
Right. And to your point, to bring it full circle, when you say compliance and you focus on compliance, you start to focus on the numbers. That's all you're dialed in on. And as long as you're making the numbers, it's like you stop seeing everything else around it. Right. And that can be dangerous.
And that gets very dangerous.
It might not be dangerous in respect that, okay, people aren't getting hurt, but you're stifling your program. You're not allowing it to grow or giving it a chance to grow, because you keep pulling it back to this minimum, to these numbers. You're just not letting it get past it.
That's interesting. I think that's a good stopping point, man, because it's an hour. Our hour is up.
And Cam's going like this.
And Cam's over there like, cut. Yeah, time's up. But I think that's a great place to wrap things up. I mean, we talked about, this living in the thirds, and maybe a little bit of discomfort is okay now and then, or pushing a little bit into your discomfort. And that's okay, because we don't want to become complacent, or we don't want to assume that everything's perfect, living in that.
Pain's necessary.
Yeah.
The struggle makes you stronger.
And this obsessive focus on compliance is actually really just kind of settling on mediocrity. And we need to kind of push beyond that as well. Oftentimes, it seems like.
Yeah. Push your standards. Keep changing them. Right. Be better than the minimums.
Right.
And it's just, pain's good once in a while.
I agree. Discomfort, pain. Yeah. I think they're necessary. You
need it. Like you need employees to be uncomfortable once in a while.
I know you're in pain right now. I'm in pain. We got to get out of these chairs, man. So
it happens when you get old. Like your sciatic flares up. Like,
and we'll talk about that next time. Because we were going to talk about that today, but it'll be the ailments episode. Yeah, exactly. No kidding. Well, really good conversation as always, man. Thanks for coming in.
Fish Fry Friday.
Fish Fry. Oh, well, I'm a Methodist, so I'm gonna have steak.
Some of my favorite time. I was a cradle Catholic, so it's some of my favorite time of the year. Fish Fry Friday.
Yeah, that's cool.
I took my daughter out to the American Legion.
Yeah, that's what you said.
And I feel so bad. Like the American Legions are just kind of dying off, like literally and figuratively. It's just the last couple generations of military personnel, veterans just aren't supporting the Legions anymore. I grew up in the Legion. Like there was
back in Pennsylvania.
Legion. I grew up. My grandfather was, but my uncles were vets, and one of my uncles was on the Legion board, and it would always take me up there. They'd always have fundraisers and raffles and all kinds of crap going on. But I walked in there. I think I was the youngest. I was the youngest person at 50 for pretty much by significant number of years, besides my daughter, right? But it's just cool being around the veterans, and I like supporting it. But it's kind of disheartening to see, like, man, they're just slowly going away.
I know. That's a shame. Did she enjoy it?
No.
She was bored out of her mind.
Not at all. It's a 14 like walking. Ew. It's like
it's old people.
Yeah. So
yeah. I can see that.
The food was good though.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
That's cool. And one parting thing, tomorrow night, the big fight. You have a prediction? John Jones is 3-year hiatus, and he's back in the ring, and he's fighting a tough guy, right?
So I'm not a John Jones fan.
Well, he's almost.
So I always hope he loses.
Yeah.
There's no denying his talent. The guy is arguably the greatest fighter ever.
Right.
Now you could argue he's also got popped for steroids and other drugs. So it's like, okay, is he legit? And I think that should taint your legacy. And he's had other legal troubles. I just don't.
As a person, you don't care for him.
I don't care for him.
He doesn't represent the sport well
at all,
obviously.
And a lot of fighters have gotten dismissed from the organization for a lot lesser
crimes,
infractions than what he has. Jones, but he's a big draw, so you know how it is.
Huge. Like, it's pay-per-view tomorrow night.
Popular, you can get away with stuff. So I kind of hope he loses. Now, one of my favorite fighters, Valentino Canseco's fighting. And I love watching her fight. She's an assassin.
She is amazing.
So she's the co-main event.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. She's an animal. Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. I'll give you a lot to think about. Really some interesting topics today. Thanks for coming in,
Anytime,
man. It's good to see you. Hope your back feels better. I hope my back feels better. Everybody have a great weekend. We are always interested in topics for discussions. If there are things that you are interested in having the group discuss, please let us know. As always, and I say with sincere gratitude, thanks to all the sponsors and supporters of the program. Ben Whitler and his buddies down at Ayers & Ayers Construction down in Lincoln have become a supporter. He just called me and said, hey, man, we like what you're doing. We'd like to help out. We sincerely appreciate that. Hurrdat appreciates it when my check's clear. So, thank you for your support, one and all. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next Friday. Bye-bye.